information, and then we can get right to the content. So welcome to today's AIM Center webinar. I'm Cynthia Curry. I'm director of the AIM Center, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's webinar. Before we begin, we want to orient you a little bit to the Zoom environment. If this is new to you, we want to make sure that you know your way around and you have access to all of the tools that are available. We do offer live closed captioning. To view those captions, click the closed caption button in your Zoom menu, and captions will appear along the bottom of your screen. We want to thank Emily for her live captioning service today. Really appreciate it. These live captions will also appear in the recording for this webinar, which will also be closed captioned. Although your microphone is muted, we really want to make sure we get all of your thoughts and comments, so please do contribute often. You have multiple people monitoring the chat, and you have multiple people who are able to address your questions throughout the webinar. So we welcome those questions to come through the chat, and if they're not answered, we do incorporate them into the archiving on the event page for the webinar, and you can always follow up with us, but we do try to answer everybody's questions and comments during the time of the webinar. When you select the chat, make sure that in the drop-down menu, just above where you enter the text for your chat, that you choose all panelists and attendees. By default, sometimes it says all panelists. We want to make sure that everybody sees all of your comments and your thoughts. And Leslie O'Callahan, our operations coordinator, will be dropping links into the chat throughout the webinar for your convenience. And also, if you are tweeting today, make sure you use the hashtag AIM4All so that you grab the AIM Center's audience as well. While Leslie is putting those links in the chat, do know that there are resources for this webinar available online at our website, and you can download those from the event page, which is at the bit.ly link on your screen, also in the chat, but that's bit.ly/website A11Y. The webinar is being recorded and will be archived on our YouTube channel within about a week once it gets closed captioned and returned to us. So as soon as that's available, a link will be made available on our website at that event page. So without further ado, I welcome Lynn McCormack and Luis Perez to deliver today's webinar, AIM Center's own duo. So thank you.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Cynthia. And thank you all for joining us today. My name is Lynn McCormack, and I'm the Senior Technologist on the AIM Center. And I'm joined today by Luis Perez. Luis, would you like to introduce yourself and say hello?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to see you all again. I did a webinar last week. Depends on when you're watching this recording, but I did one on PDFs, and now I'm back for website accessibility. So glad to be with you. Normally I'm based out of Florida, but I'm traveling as I'm recording this webinar. So great to join you from wherever I am in the country.
Thanks, Luis. So we're going to get started today. And so we have a couple of goals for our webinar today. And it's really thinking about increasing your awareness of how important it is to have accessibility in your digital communications. So today we're concentrating on thinking about your website. Last week we were thinking about PDFs, but those things go hand in hand. Many of the concepts overlap from the things that we learned last week about PDFs, so we'll cover some of those again this week in the context of the website. And we want to really empower you with actionable steps today, thinking about more accessible websites. So we're gonna give you some to-dos and some activities. So today's agenda is very interactive. If you thought that today you were going to just sit back and relax for an hour and just get things poured into you, I'm sorry, this is not what today is all about. Today is going to be interactive. We're going to be doing some polling. We're going to be having you do an audit of your website. So it's, as the title says, is your state, your district, or your school website accessible? I want you to be thinking about what the website is and where that URL is and how you can get to that, because we're going to be using that as we move today through this webinar. Okay, so we are going to start with question 1. So Cynthia, can you poll with question 1, please? All right, so question 1 asks, how accessible is your state, district, or school website.
Lynn and Luis, you can see the results coming in, correct?
Yes.
Great. All right, that looks like just about everybody has responded.
I think everybody that thinks about responding.
Oh, and we have more people coming in as the poll is open.
Yeah, it looks like we just got Aaron coming in and maybe Anne as well. So welcome to the webinar. I think we could probably go through and show this then, Cynthia.
Oh, I thought it was displaying. Okay, let's see. Share the results. There we go. Great.
There we go. Okay, super. So we got kind of a mix, which is fantastic. So some of you feel really confident that your website is fully accessible, and that's really exciting. I feel like our websites are really accessible, and I feel like today I'm still going to learn something. I'm hoping that some of you share some of the tools that you have. So even if your website's fully accessible, I feel like accessibility is a journey. So we're still going to be learning here together. And if you have something to share, I'd love for you to share. So a largest number of folks said that your website is partially accessible. So it looks like you're on the journey towards trying to make yours more accessible, so that's great. Our website's not accessible. This is a no judgment zone here today. So for sure, I want you to feel that there's absolutely no judgment here at the AIM Center, and we want you to join us on the journey towards accessibility. And we just hope that every day that things are a little bit better than the day they were before, or that you're on a path to that. And some of you aren't sure. And I hope that we're definitely going to answer that question today about whether you think that you have some work to do or not to do. So great. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and where you are right now. So do you have to do something to turn that off now? Cynthia?
You all can just close it out of your screen. Just close out the window.
Okay. Do I close that or do you close it, Cynthia?
Each of you has to.
Okay, super. Great. So when we say accessible, what do we mean by accessible? So we want to make sure that all of our users, regardless of their differences, that they have the ability to access the same information, have the same interactions with your website, access the same services with really the same equivalent ease of use. So I'm hopeful that we're all on the same pages for what we think about as being accessible, at least the functional definition of what accessibility is. And those user differences, there's about 20% of the population that has a diagnosed disability, but it's really a continuum, and that we are all on that continuum at some point in time. So we think about that there's visual differences like colorblind, low vision, no vision, but you can think about the fact that when you're in bright sunlight, so really all of us have a continuum of visual abilities depending on the context that we're in. We think about the hearing differences that our users might have. We think about deafness, hard of hearing, or perhaps being in a noisy room. All those affect the way people can hear the information on our website. Our users might have motor differences. They might have difficulty with fine motor control. They might have difficulty using a keyboard. They might be using a switch only. They might have slow response times. They might be in a bumpy vehicle. So there's a continuum of motor differences as well. And also thinking about cognitive differences. So they might have focus issues. They might have learning differences. They might be a sleep-deprived new parent. They might have had too much coffee that day. So there are a lot of differences that we have to really think about in our users as they're trying to access our website. And so I wonder if this is old news, but it might be new news to some of you. So there were 2 suits that were settled back in 2015. And these really formulate our plan for thinking about accessibility. So the first suit was the National Foundation for the Blind versus the Seattle public education system. And so oftentimes we think of our website, we might think of the students, maybe if we're a teacher, that none of my students have any differences, so I don't have to worry about that. But in this case, a blind parent could not access the students' materials and try and help their students with their homework. So you really have to think across the board at the abilities for all of your users, even the users that you don't know. It could be somebody who's tutoring somebody, it could be some grandparent that's helping for an evening. So you're gonna have to think all of the users, even if you haven't identified who they are. You have to just really think of all those users. And then the second case, also in 2015, was edX, and they had an issue in that as a resolution, so the platform in that case was accessible. And in that case, the content was not accessible. So there's a combination of both of those things. So you, as a school department, may have bought a system to deploy your website, and that system is accessible. But if you're putting materials on there that are not accessible, it still means that your site is not accessible. So it's important to think about both of those things. Even though you've gone and bought the right tool, you have to make sure it's a continuous evaluation process to make sure that everything that you put on there is also accessible. And if you're interested in learning more about certain cases that have happened, you can actually search on the Department of Ed Office of Civil Rights for resolution agreements covering Title II of the ADA. So for example, I looked in Massachusetts, and there are 9 different documents and some interesting cases that you can look at. And if you're looking just across the states with no state specified, you come out with 1,000 different documents. So it's kind of interesting to look at what's available and look at what the resolutions were. There was a time about a year or so ago, I don't want to get into any politics, but there was quite a lot of new cases happening. And because of the political climate right now, there are fewer cases happening, but it's still really important for us to be addressing these situations, not from a punitive or worrying about a punitive situation, although that possibility is out there, but really thinking about serving all of our constituents in the best way possible. So general outcomes from those cases, here's some just general outcomes from those cases. So in your organization, you should have an accessibility coordinator. You should have a published process for reporting accessibility issues. You should have a published accessibility policy, and you should have some kind of accessibility audit. And that standard right now in 508 is WCAG 2.0 AA, but WCAG 2.1 was released in June of this year. And we're going to talk about each one of these things. Oh, but first we've got another poll. All right, so question number 2 is in progress now. You can answer all of these that apply to you. So do you have an accessibility coordinator? Do you have a process for reporting accessibility issues? Do you have a written and published accessibility policy? Have you recently performed accessibility audit? And maybe you're not sure of any of those things, or these are things you're learning about today.
All right, right now we have about 65% of our attendees have responded, so we'll have a little bit more time for people to decide. All right, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. Oh, we got 19. There's one person who hasn't responded. If you'd like to respond, now would be the time. All right, I'll go ahead and end the poll.
Excellent. All right, so about half of you have an accessibility coordinator. about 40% have a process for reporting accessibility issues. 40% have an accessibility policy, excellent. And nearly 60% of you have performed an accessibility audit, so that's really exciting. And some of you are not too sure, and that's okay, because we're excited that you're here today to join us to learn a little bit more about this. Great. So Luis, do you want to take this section, or do you want to talk about the accessibility coordinator first?
I'll let you go ahead with the accessibility coordinator first, and I'll fill in some of the gaps.
Yeah, excellent. So your organization should have a person who represents the accessibility coordinator. It could be part of one person, maybe if you're a small school, or if you're a large district, it certainly could be an entire person's position. So it really depends on the amount of resources that you have. And that person must be able to understand that diversity of users we were talking about earlier, because you're going to be representing those users and their best interest in making sure that you are covering each one of those users and giving them the best possible user experience. You have to understand both the content and the context so that you're delivering that information in the best way possible. And you have to be able to advocate for the needed resources. So you have to be able to advocate for resources ongoing, because making sure that you have all the accessibility features that you need. For instance, making sure as you move forward that you produce videos that have captioning and transcripts. So making sure that you have the resources to have those additional features that you may not have right now. And if we find out today that you need some work and that your sites are not as accessible as you expected, that you need to be able to advocate for those resources for that remediation. So, and also this person should be involved in any sort of tech decisions that are happening within your educational organization, whether it's a school, a district, a statewide. So in any of the tech purchasing decisions, they should have some understanding in those areas. And if you don't have an accessibility coordinator and you get through the end of the day today, then I'm gonna plead with you to work within your organization to have somebody assigned to this role, or maybe raise your hand to have yourself, because obviously you're here today to learn about these things. So that would be fantastic if you were stepping into this role as well. So we welcome you to do that.
And what I would add, Lynn, is also that where this person sits makes a difference as well. So depending within your larger organization, larger university, where they sit sort of frames their position a bit. So depending on whether they sit in, your ADA office or your compliance office, or are they a part of, instructional design and so on. So that's an important consideration as well as you're sort of defining that role. Where is that person going to sit within the organization?
Super. So a little bit about the accessibility policy and context. Luis, do you want to handle this one? This one is specifically the screenshot from the Seattle Public Schools, which is one of the cases that I mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. The accessibility policy is really important because that provides a way for individuals with disabilities to let you know if there are some issues with the website, with their experience, with your web applications. So it's really important as a best practice to have a variety of ways that people can contact you. And so that may be email, that may be, they can call you on the phone, that could be snail mail. Yeah, some of us still use that from time to time when we can find the stamps. So just the main idea there is that there's multiple ways to contact you. And we recently updated our accessibility statement within the AIM Center. So there's a screenshot of it here. We looked around at a number of different accessibility statements and kind of identified some of the common features that they had. That was one that was just kept coming up time and time again, making sure that there's multiple ways to contact somebody who's responsible for maintaining the website and making some of the fixes that need to be made. Along with that, sort of helping the user by having some clear statements that explain what you've done to make the website more accessible. So that could be including, a skip navigation link. We'll talk about a lot of these other options later. Making sure that you're transparent about which standards you're addressing when you're working on your website, at what level. So, Lynn already mentioned that could be Section 508, that could be WCAG. So making sure that you're clear on that. Any special features that you include for your end users to improve their experience. So for instance, on our website, we have a feature called Speech Stream, which provides text-to-speech for any of the content on the website. So just making sure that people are aware that that accessibility support is there, along with what you've done to make the content more accessible. And then I've put in a couple of just sort of extra touches here to round out that accessibility statement. One is you can provide some helpful links to free assistive technology, so that if somebody is struggling with the website, you can find things like a free screen reader, like NVDA on Windows, or VoiceOver on the Mac, or Narrator, which is the built-in screen reader on Windows. So you're just saving a step for the person that needs that support to be able to use the website. And then finally, and again, this is not an essential component, but it's something that's great to share, is evidence of your commitment to the accessibility community. So for instance, CAS has created a tool called Figuration, which is a tool for developing responsive, accessible websites. So anything like that you're contributing to the community, that helps you going forward, because what a lot of these steps show, having an accessibility coordinator, having a clear accessibility policy and an accessibility statement, is that you're making a good faith effort to incorporate accessibility, and you're being proactive and taking some concrete steps to improve the accessibility of the website. And that's going to come in and be helpful later on. If we do have one of those complaints that Lynn mentioned at the beginning, it shows that you then just kind of sit back and not address the situation, but you were proactive in addressing it.
Yeah, and I just want to mentioning Figuration here. So today we're sort of skimming the top of web accessibility today. But Luis mentioned Figuration and figuration.org. The link was put into the chat. So as we're going through things today, if there are ideas you have for other webinars or pieces that you want more information on, because we could probably do a whole session on Figuration and developing accessible, responsive websites. And if you're interested in that, we'd love to get that feedback. So figuration.org, if you've gone off and looked at that, say, wow, that's pretty cool. I'd love to hear more about that. Please by all means, give us that sort of feedback. That's important for us to have and important for us to serve you. So if you're looking for that information, we'd love to be able to provide that. All right, so one of the things was auditing. So if you're thinking about an accessibility audit, there's two ways you can go about doing that. You can have an outsider, an external accessibility audit versus an internal accessibility audit. And so let's just take a few minutes to think about those different ways that you can have those audits and what might work for your organization. So if you're thinking about the first one, external, you're going to have to pay somebody. In general, people don't do these for free, so you'll have to hire somebody to come in, and there's a whole range of folks in this area that would provide you with accessibility audits. And they'll be able to bring to the table the access to multiple environments. So if you don't know who all your users are, you actually may not have access. You might be a Chrome tool, and that's what you have, and you don't have access to MacBooks and all different types of tablets, and yet you're serving parents or others that are outside, and they might be having those environments. So you may not have the ability to test on those environments and make sure that everything works in those environments and along with the assistive technology in those environments. So that's a consideration if you want to have a broad base of different types of technologies. They may have access to a wider range of assistive tools and devices, so that's another capacity that they might have. And the fourth bullet here, I want to actually caution a little bit. So they may be experts in accessibility, but they may not be experts in your context area. So for instance, perhaps they are great at financial institutions and that they make sure financial institutions have the best accessible website for people doing their banking. So that might be fantastic, but you are developing a math curriculum, let's just say, and in that context, they may not be able to help you think about how would I write alternative text or how do I do math markup language. So thinking about what things are important to you and what they're experts in. You want to make sure that those things match up so that they're experts and they have some understanding of education and your audience as well. They may be able to provide you with some training. They're likely very well trained, and so that could be part of your sort of handoff process. So that's something to think about. But on the downside, they are generally going to do a snapshot of where you are right now. They aren't necessarily going to be there in a week, in a month. And later on, we're gonna do a mini audit, and I had done this mini audit, and it came out perfectly, and I had that in my presentation. And then when I checked it yesterday, they had changed their website, and it no longer came out so perfectly. So it was this great example of where they probably had a website audit or something at some point in time, and then something changed. So it's important to think about after that accessibility audit, how do I make sure into the future that I continue to keep up and have the capacity to provide that level of accessibility moving forward. So you have to think about, do I have the capacity to do this internally? Do I have the expertise internally to be able to do this? Do I have a sufficient number of environments internally that I can have good cross-representation? And do I have the right tools to be able to do this? And we're going to look at quite a few tools here today. So we're gonna arm you with some of those tools as we move forward here. Do you have any thoughts, Luis?
Yeah, one of the things that I was going to say is with regard to different devices, a point that you made, especially with some environments that are somewhat fragmented, where there's just different versions of the operating system. Not everybody updates. So it's when you contract with somebody, just make sure that they sort of do testing across, desktop, mobile, different operating systems, different versions, just to get a sort of comprehensive view. But also, as you mentioned, Lynn, it's really important to have a plan in place. Things are changing so quickly, and things are getting updated a lot more frequently now. So instead of just a snapshot, sort of have a plan going forward to how you're going to build this, the sort of mini audits or whatever you want to call it in your organization, into the development cycle. So it's something that you're considering, even when you have early prototypes. You can present those prototypes to individuals with disabilities. You can do some of this testing yourself, and that will help you identify some of these issues early on, where it may be a little bit less expensive and take a lot less work to fix them than if you wait until the end.
For sure. When you're early on in the process, if you're developing a new website, you definitely want to go through those steps to try to mitigate having something multiplied by 10 or 20 or 100 or 1,000, because it becomes much more difficult later on. All right, so you've been sitting back. You get to sit back for 28 minutes. Well, except for a few polls. But now it's time for you to start working. So I'm going to leave our presentation, and you all are going to join me, and we're going to go to this website. It's called wave.webaim.org, and Leslie has dropped it right into the chat window. So you're going to be able to go right there. Let's see. So it's going to look like this. Everybody see that? And everybody able to go there. Now, I'm going to test the website, that the AIM Center website, and it's the page that has all of the information from today's webinar on it. But I don't want you to go there. Earlier on in the presentation, we talked about you checking out your website. So if you don't want to look at your website, again, no judgment zone today. You could pick somebody else's website. But I'm going to grab the website that we're going to look at. And thanks for putting that in the chat window, because that helped me too, Leslie. All right, so I'm going to take a look at the accessibility of our website. So right away, you can see there are 5 errors on our website. So the first thing I'm going to caution you is that all of the tools that we're going to show you today have the possibility for leading to false negatives and false positives. So all of these tools require a little bit of skill. So I know, for instance, that these places where it's giving me an error, that I have an Aria tag in there that describes what that is, but the way that the tool is picking it up, it's giving me an error. It's giving me 9 alerts, and it tells me I have 9 features. I have 23 structural elements, 30 HTML5 or Aria elements, and I have no contrast errors. So I'll give you guys a second just to look at what you have on your tool. All right, so now I'm going to go to the detailed listing on here, and I'm just going to walk you through some of the things that I see, and I want you to look at the things that you see. I don't expect that you're going to see the same thing that I see. So yours may have 5 errors, it might have 0 errors, it might have 30 errors. Again, no judgment zone today, and I wouldn't be able to explain what your errors might be. I can only explain what my errors are here today. And so this is interesting in that it gives you an alert because our Word document and our PowerPoint document are here linked to the website. And as we talked about right at the beginning of this session, and going back to last week's webinar on thinking about inclusive PDFs and making sure that they're designed right, what it's saying is that any time that you have a document that's linked off of your website, there's the possibility that that document wasn't built in a way for accessibility. So it's just giving you that notice that that might be, and perhaps you have hundreds of documents, and perhaps those documents may not have been done in a way that they are accessible. So one of the other features is you'll see your alternative text. You can see that I have alternative text in images, and I've got a nice green arrow here that says that I have form labels. And I know that that, in fact, is our search that's on our website, and our search is appropriately labeled, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. It says I have a skip link and also a skip link target. So both of those things should exist, and I'll actually show you this in action a little bit when we do a manual testing of some of these things. And then all the way down on structural elements, just curious, how did you do on your structural elements? So this is actually going back to last week's webinar again on inclusive PDF. And so how the heading structure is important, because that's the way that users can navigate through your document and understand different sections of the document. So there should be one heading 1, potentially multiple heading 2s, heading 3s. And so just think about that part for a minute. And then how well is your document actually structured? So on this particular page, there's one header, one navigation section, one main content section, and one footer section. So that's the question, whether or not that there's, you have all the pieces. I know on some other parts of the AIM website, we have both a top navigation and a left-hand navigation. In that case, on those pages, there's actually 2 navigation sections on the site. And then there's some Aria information as well. I'm not going to go into the Aria today. I know that we had gotten one request for Aria, but if there are folks on the line that want to do a session that dives deeper into Aria tagging, because I think that's a little bit beyond the scope of what we have today, then do, by all means, you can let us know.
If I may chime in, Lynn, definitely I think that's a good idea to think about doing a session on Aria, but I also want to emphasize, try to do as much as you can with the standard HTML functionality that's provided, as opposed to sort of using Aria as sort of like a go-to. So think about how you can start with, the native affordances of HTML elements, and then use Aria to enhance that. And it's the same thing with CSS, cascading style sheets, right? It's important to begin with a good structure, and then use CSS to kind of enhance that with the presentation. So separating the content from the presentation. So I just wanted to throw that in. I think Aria is a really powerful technology, but at the same time, I've seen that, sometimes it is possible to go overboard with it and sort of ignore some of the things that you can do with the native elements.
Super. So that's the highlight of the Wave accessibility tools. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take a look at that if you wanted to enter them into the chat. Hopefully you all got a sense at least of what your site looks like in the Wave, and feeling good, or maybe not so good, or feeling like, wow, I'm going to leave this webinar knowing I've got work to do. And Luis, do you want to show the other tool at this point in time? And then,
absolutely. And I also wanted to share a comment in the chat. They say that the #1 rule of Aria is don't use Aria. So it's like Fight Club, the first rule of Fight Club. And so what she's saying, what they're saying here is no Aria is better than bad Aria. So again, it's thinking about being really purposeful about how you use some of these enhancements like CSS and Aria and so on. So I'm going to take over the screen. So I think you have to release it, Lynn, and then I'll be able to take over. Let's see. Yep, I think I can take it over from here. Just let me see it. Let me know if you see my. Okay, you're all seeing my screen now?
I see the desktop.
No, we're still seeing, now we see yours, Louise.
So just answering one of the questions in the chat, somebody asked, well, what about third-party content? So I will drop this link into the chat in just a second, but the WCAG, or the W3C, which is the standards body, they have some guidance on that, understanding partial conformance related to third-party content. So we'll go ahead and drop that into the chat in just a second. So one of the other tools, in addition to Wave, especially if you're just getting started with web accessibility, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I guess we'll go with Totally, or, Total Ally, I don't know. So we'll come up with a correct pronunciation. So this is a tool, you may be familiar with this company called Khan Academy. They produce videos and other content for learning math. They started out with math, but now they produce content around a number of different topics. So this is a visualization toolkit, and it allows you to see the accessibility of a website. So I'm going to go down to the bottom. And first of all, if you scroll down to the bottom of the website, which will drop into the chat, you can see how to install it. It's really simple. You just basically take a button that appears on the page and you drag it up into your toolbar of your web browser. And so you can add this into a variety of different web browsers. It's just a snippet of JavaScript that will do the work once you enable it. So when you click on that button in your toolbar, you'll see an icon at the bottom of your screen. It looks like eyeglasses, again, for the idea of visualization. So on the page, right where you install it, you'll see some examples that you can run the tool on to learn a little bit more. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to bring up the eyeglasses. I'm going to click on it. And then I can go ahead and select headings. And then it gives me information about the headings on the page, including some of the errors that I may have, but also I can see the heading structure. So this is really cool if you want to see, well, maybe I skipped the heading level. Well, that's one of the things that it's going to point out here. So in there, you can see that we skipped the heading level, and so it points that out as one of the errors. Another nice thing that it can do is it can show you the contrast levels of some of the things on the page. So let me see if I can find one here. So here you can see this is an error. The contrast is not sufficient. There is a certain ratio that you have to meet for contrast level in order to be compliant with WCAG. And so it says this is 3.17 when the acceptable ratio is 4.5 to 1. And there are a number of other tests you can perform here. It can point out if you have any images that are missing alt text, so they're missing the description. And you can also show the structure of the page. I'm going to actually run it on our website. I'm going to go over to the AIM Center website. And I'm going to enable, I've already clicked the button in the toolbar. I'm going to enable that and select landmarks. And then you should see at the top of the screen, it's showing us where the navigation is. It's showing us where some of the button roles are and so on. So again, this is not an audit tool, but if you're just starting out and you want to learn more about these features, it can help you see those features visually. Things like landmarks, labels for your form elements, link text, make sure that it's descriptive and so on. So that's one of the tools that I wanted to share with you. The other tool is something called AXE, A-X-E. What's nice about it is a free Chrome extension, and you run it on your Chrome web browser, and then it adds a special tab to your developer tools within Chrome. So let me see if I can bring that up on here. I'm going to go into more tools, and then I'm going to choose developer tools. And that will come up as a tab on the side. So for those of you that are a little bit more techie oriented, this would be a great tool. It's sort of the next step up from the Wave tool. And so in here, I should be able to find a tab. Let me see, I may have to drag this out a little bit, get myself a little bit more space. Let's see if we can do that. There we go, AXE. And then I will select Analyze. And it will do sort of something similar to what, I'm on the Chrome extension. I need to switch to another page, and then I can do that. So let me see, in the interest of time, just know that I'm gonna skip that step, but just know that it's another tool that you can use in addition to the Wave tool. It's a little bit more comprehensive, but with all of these tools, they give you some help. So it's not just about identifying what's the error, but also here's how you can fix it, or they'll give you a code snippet that you can review to see exactly where the error is. So let me see, how are we doing on time, Lynn? Because I want to run this, and I'm committed to it. Yeah, it should only take a second. So I'm going to do an analyze, and this one better be good because it's from the W3C. So in here, you can see it gives you the errors, and then it organizes them into different categories. So things like form elements, having a visible label, all of these different issues that you may come up with. You can see there's some contrast errors here too. So like I said, with any of these things, you can select it, and then you can find where it is in your code, and it gives you some guidance on how to fix it and so on. So again, Wave is one tool, AXE is another. There's a number of them out there. It's almost like when I work with assistive technology, no one tool is going to be perfect for every learner. So we choose a range of different tools. It's the same thing when you're doing this kind of testing. You want to kind of check out at least a couple of tools to see if you get different results, because that can help you sort of see some patterns. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll turn it over back to you, Lynn.
Okay, great. Let me get back. So while I'm trying to find my place here, so the other tool that's related to AXE, Luis, is AXE Coconut. And so I have that actually later on as one of the, all right, so let's see here. And that's actually a little bit, sorry about that, sorry about the screen cutting through. And that actually is just, lives at the top of the toolbar, so you don't actually have to go into those developer tools. But it's pretty similar to what Luis just showed us, which is great. And I don't know if you just wanted to say about the color contrast analyzer tool as well before we.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite tools that I sort of have available to me throughout the day, because color is something that I'm really conscious of, mostly because I need high contrast myself. And so this is a tool from the Paciello group. It's Color, spelled the British way, contrast analyzer, and it runs on Windows and the Mac, so it's cross-platform, and it's really easy to use. You get these color pickers. Wave, the same people that created Wave, WebAIM, they have an online color contrast checker, but again, you have to open up your web browser and copy the color values and put them in there. This is just a tool that you can sort of launch and just keep on the side on your desktop, on your system, and then as you need to check the color contrast, you can bring it up and just use the color pickers to choose your foreground color, your background color, and then see whether it passes WCAG level AA for both normal text and larger text. So it's a really nice tool to have in your bag of tricks.
I'm going to second Luis. This is one of my favorites and one that I will definitely use when I end up with the color contrast issues that I'm trying to identify. All right, so no matter what, all those tools that we just showed you, there's always going to be some manual things that you're going to have to check. So for instance, it might check whether you have alt text, but whether or not that alt text is valid, it's maybe every single field. There used to be tools that just defaulted alt text into every alt text field. And so, great, it's valid and it runs through the checker, but it isn't actually very valid. So there's always some manual checking that has to happen. And similarly for forms, that they might be missing labels, and that would show up as missing a label, but it could also be like it says form field 1. Well, that's not very helpful to somebody if they're trying to listen to a screen reader and know what to put into form field 1. So if it said first name, that would actually be much more helpful. So it might have that content, but the content may not in fact be valid. And I was gonna walk us through a tab order exercise, but I think that we may not have enough time to do that. I don't know.
So I'll add something to the tab order conversation, Lynn. I think this is one of the easiest accessibility tests you can do is take the no mouse challenge. So basically go to the website that you're interested in sort of considering in terms of accessibility and just flip your mouse over and then see if you can get around that website by pressing tab and shift tab. I know in Safari there's one extra setting you have to enable in order for it to work right, but in general in most web browsers, tabbing through will give you a sense of what that logical tab order should be. And then sort of a nuance thing is not only can you tab it through in a logical order, but can you tell at each time that you press tab where the focus is? Because that's something that's often ignored. And if you can't see like where the focus is, then it doesn't matter that it's keyboard accessible, that you can tab through, because the person may not be able to see where they are on the screen. So using some CSS sometimes, cascading style sheets, you can go in and style that focus state so that it adds a thicker outline around the form element. So that's more of a usability suggestion, I think, that really enhances the both the usability and accessibility of form elements.
Yeah, so that was perfect. So while you were talking about it, I was actually demonstrating it. So that worked perfectly. Hopefully all of you were able to see that I have the website, the AIM website up and on our page that we've been working on today. And so right at the very top, the first thing I tab to once I get to the page, as you can see it at the very top, I'll go back. This is skip to main content. So the very first thing in the tab order should be something that says skip to main content. And we talked about those different landmarks earlier. So the main content would be it's going to skip any of the navigation and go to the main part of the page. And just as Luis was talking about, I can see where I am. They're highlighting in bright green as I'm navigating across those that navigation at the top. So if hopefully you all still had your website up in the background and you're able to take a look at that and see how you did with your tab order there.
And another comment, Lynn, is people often think that the skip to main content links are just for people that are using screen readers, but they also help people that are keyboard users or keyboard only. So it's really important that, that shows up when you tab through, so that it's not just accessible to screen reader users, because there might be a keyboard only person, or there might be a switch user, so a switch access technology user. And it's important that that shows through as one of the first items, like you mentioned, when you first tab to the website, because they'll be able to use that as well.
Yeah, and I actually am one of those people. I've been programming for so long, my mouse hand doesn't really work anymore. So I am 90% just keyboard, except for when people make it really difficult for me to get to some of those other places. All right, so we talked about Axe Coconut, and there's another add-on to Chrome, and those are also in the digital handout. You have plenty of opportunity to try out all these tools, but I want to hear from you now on question 3. So we had some ideas when we started this about how our websites were or weren't. Some of us were unsure. Some of us felt really confident. And so, what are you thinking now? Kind of agreed with what you thought you had?
We're certainly hoping it's not yikes.
Well, but remember, it's a no judgment zone here today. We're all learning. And then at the end of the webinar, you learned a few things, and you're enthused about doing better tomorrow. Then really, that's fantastic, and we're totally fine with that.
And
there
that's
are
the key.
some yikes. There are some yikes, and they're growing. So that's great. Bring on the yikes.
But remember, I think with accessibility, I've always said this. Perfect can be the enemy of good. So the goal is to, each time that you go to that website, each time you do an update, is there a new technique that you can learn and that you can incorporate as you sort of develop that website or that web application to make it better? Because that's really the goal, is to make sure that people have a good experience. So how can you make that experience even better each time? Hey, it kind of evened out, actually. We're looking at, about 31% for great. So the mini audit, if that was the case, then you're in good shape. You're on the right direction, heading in the right direction. Good, we have 31% as well. Yikes, 31%. But again, as we said, that just means, you have a little bit more work to do. But again, if you take a growth mindset to it, you can definitely get to a higher level of accessibility and continue to improve. And then I'll try this later was 6%. So I just wanted to read those out so that you can see that or hear that.
Super. All right, so I think we covered some of these issues. So some of the common issues that you would find was potentially that you either don't have landmarks or that your page structure is somehow not there. That's very common. That the heading structure or the outline of the page, you might have an H1, an H2, and then an H5, and people might have chosen that one. It's in a CMS, and I really like the way the H5 looks. And so sometimes those sort of things happen. So heading structure outlines not being in the right order is common, and you could work on that. When we talked about color contrast, this is very, very common, and that was the issue with that site that I had used as sort of being the great example. They had added an orange button. Orange is notoriously difficult to get the right color contrast. So I wasn't surprised when I saw the orange buttons that they didn't have color contrast. Oftentimes, we didn't talk about this much today, but you might have seen these on your website, is that you have these spinning carousels or spinning animations or any of those sort of things, oftentimes without any control. In general, you should not start things moving on a page. Your users should have some control over that, and at an absolute minimum, you have to be able to shut those things off. But oftentimes, you might have used a tool that has those carousels, and you think those would be fantastic, and they get put into the page. So these are very, very common issues that you might find. That skip link that we showed you, that may not be programmed into your site. The tab order may be in some other order. It might be in an order that's unexpected or out of order with where you would expect visually to traverse the page. The links, maybe on there without descriptive language. You might have 5 links on the page that says see more or more information. And so somebody who is going through with a screen reader, getting to each one of those links, and they all just say more information, more information, more information. So that's not very descriptive. So making sure that those links are very important, that they specify the unique place that each one of those links are going to be going. Making sure that your forms have valid input labels. We did talk about that already. Alt text is missing, redundant, or too long. Yeah. Yes, that is such a thing. Right, Luis?
Yeah, and again, it depends on the image. If you're working with STEM content where you have a complex image, obviously your alt text is going to be more extensive. And it also depends on the goal of what you need to do in a learning context with that image. But yes, if the alt text is too long, then the person who's listening to it, they may tune out, tune in or tune out, right? I was going to add to the forms a quick tip. One of the things you can do when you have a form is you can tap the label or click on it with the mouse. And if it's associated with the control next to it, then the focus should go right to that control. So that's a quick way that you can check to make sure that your controls are associated with their labels. It's just by tapping or clicking on the label. And if you have that in place, that really helps out people that have motor issues, because they may not be able to click precisely into the text field or the radio button, whatever that control is, but they may be able to move the mouse around and be able to click on the label that may be bigger, has a bigger head area. So that's, again, another simple test that you can do. That's one of those manual checks that you can supplement the more automated tests. The other ones here, the audio and video, that's one where I would recommend, a lot of times people will check at the beginning of a video. So make sure that you have a good sample. So make sure you go somewhere in the middle of the video and play a few seconds, 30 seconds, a minute there, and then go to the end. And that's just to make sure, keeping people honest, to make sure that, it wasn't lunchtime or something and they decided to kind of leave the job half done. But also you want to check about quality again. So just as there is the issue of quality with alt text, there's an issue of quality with captions as well. So making sure that it's not automatically generated, but it's actual, high quality captions that are present in that video would be important. And of course, we kind of touched on Aria, but that's a more advanced topic. But do you want to mention that, Lynn, a little bit?
Yeah, I was just going to mention the fact that I knew what it meant, because oftentimes people are like, what is Aria? It sounds like a airplane or something like that. So accessible, rich internet applications, that's what the ARIA stands for. And again, if you're interested in that more, and it's really about those sort of pieces that move, those pieces that kind of come on and off of the page. So all of those often will have tagging so that your assistive technology can pick up on what those pieces are and get the right messaging at the right time. So that's an important part of many dynamic websites today that do have the need to have the ARIA tagging. So we have about 2 minutes left here. And I want to think about addressing the gaps with you. So some of you today definitely felt like you have a place that you have to get to, that you're not quite there yet. So I'd love for you to take what you did today to help you think about prioritizing perhaps what it is that you need to get to. And I'm going to skip right down to the bottom one is that don't remove all the content from your website. And I'm going to say that because Leslie just put in the Berkeley deletes online content. So last year, Berkeley, it was last year, I think it was 2017, Berkeley had a bunch of lecture style videos out on their website, 40,000 plus of them that they had. And they did not have the captioning that they needed. And so while many people could use them and found them very useful, they opted, instead of actually going through and remediating that, they just decided to take everything down. So I'm not suggesting any of you do that, and that made me super sad. So if things are out there that are not accessible, use this to think about, how do I plug the holes? How do I make sure that from here on out, I'm doing things in an accessible way as best I know how to do. How do I make a timeline to address the things? So what are the pieces of my website that gets the most traffic, and how do I remediate those pieces first? How do I prioritize and get the biggest bang for the buck? All that, in all those cases that we learned about earlier, what they were looking for, good faith effort moving in the right direction. And so I really want to make sure that from today, you're thinking about what is one step or two steps that I can take to move forward with my website that's really going to get me in the right direction. And even if it's just putting up an accessibility statement, that would be fantastic. And it's 3 o'clock. Thank you so much. Let's go. We don't have time for questions, but if you want to contact Louise or myself, and please do, your feedback is so important to us. So if you have a minute right now to fill out the survey, we greatly appreciate it. And Louise, last minute.
Just wanted to thank Emily for providing the captions. Thanks Cynthia and Leslie for their support during the webinar. And just to reiterate what Lynn McCormack, my good friend and colleague, said, just making that good faith effort and just aiming to be better, aiming to just go higher with accessibility. That's really the goal.
Thank you. And one last time, Leslie. Excellent. So Leslie just posted, if you didn't get a chance to download the slides, everything is available at the bit.ly/website A11Y. Thanks so much for your time today and have a great day.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.